925 Mary.
What's up with 925 Adam? Halldale, Rosecrans.
911, what's your emergency?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of my series Crafts and Crimes. Every week I post a new video of myself crafting while talking about a different true crime. This week I will be talking about the crime of Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, usually referred to together as Leopold and Loeb. Nathan Freudenthal Leopold Jr. was born on November 19, 1904 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the youngest of 3 sons born to Nathan and Florence Leopold. The family were wealthy German Jewish immigrants who had made a name for themselves in the transportation industry. Leopold was allegedly an intellectually precocious child, but it is unclear if these reports were exaggerated by the release of his autobiography. In his youth he was bullied while at public school because of his intelligence. He claimed to understand 15 languages and speak 5 fluently. His intelligence set Leopold apart from his peers, which made it difficult for him to make friends. They also didn't appreciate his attitude of superiority when it came to his family's wealth. When the family moved to the affluent Kenwood area of Chicago, he was transferred to the private Harvard School. While at this school, Leopold advanced rapidly and was attending college by age 15. At the University of Chicago in 1920, Leopold formed a friendship with fellow prodigy Richard Loeb. Richard Albert Loeb was born on June 11, 1905 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the third of 4 sons born to Anna and Albert Loeb, a wealthy lawyer and retired vice president of Sears and Roebuck. His father was Jewish and his mother was Catholic. Loeb, by all accounts, was extremely intelligent and skipped several grades in school. He was able to enter the innovative University High School at age 12, and with the encouragement of his governess he was able to finish school in 2 years. During his youth, Loeb outwardly appeared to be affable and well-liked, but he also had a sinister side. He became a thief early on and would make up outlandish stories whenever he was caught. Additionally, he developed an elaborate fantasy life as a master criminal, evolving from minor family thefts to shoplifting, vandalism, and arson. At 14 years old, Loeb was admitted into the University of Chicago, where he formed a friendship with Leopold. In 1921 he transferred to the University of Michigan. At 17 years old, Loeb became the youngest person to graduate from the university despite his spotty academic history and a problem with alcohol. In 1923 both Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb graduated from university before pursuing postgraduate degrees at the University of Chicago. Although Leopold and Loeb were familiar with each other growing up in the affluent Kenwood area of Chicago, this was the point where they began to develop a much deeper connection. The brilliant but socially inept Leopold was enthralled with the handsome and vivacious Loeb. Loeb in return found an excellent alter ego for his fantasy world in which he was supreme. The two eventually developed a sexual relationship. The 2 men were fascinated with Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of the Superman, viewing themselves as a prime example. They began asserting their perceived immunity from normal restrictions by committing petty theft and vandalism. Loeb convinced Leopold to break into the fraternity house at the University of Michigan that had kicked him out. They stole a variety of items, including the typewriter they would use to write a ransom note. Emboldened by their success, the pair began committing more serious crimes, including arson. They weren't receiving the recognition they thought they deserved by the media, so the pair became obsessed with committing the perfect murder. Over a 7-month period, Leopold and Loeb planned their crime, eventually settling on kidnapping and murdering an adolescent boy. They planned every detail from the method of abduction to how they would dispose of the body. To obscure the actual nature of the crime, they decided to make a ransom demand, and wrote the note using the typewriter they stole. The plan to collect the ransom would involve an intricate series of instructions that the pair would deliver one set at a time by phone. A chisel was selected as the murder weapon. After a lengthy search for a suitable victim, mostly around the Harvard School for Boys in Kenwood, they settled on 14-year-old Robert Bobby Franks. Bobby lived across the street from Loeb. He was also his second cousin, and the two would play tennis together. On May 21, 1924, after 7 months of planning, Leopold and Loeb put their plan into action. They rented a car and obscured the license plate before driving into the Kenwood area of Chicago. The pair pulled up next to Bobby as he walked home and offered him a ride, which he initially refused. Loeb was able to lure the teen into the car under the pretense of talking to him about the racket he had been using when they played tennis. Bobby was struck repeatedly in his head with a chisel by Loeb, who was sitting behind him in the car, before dragging his body into the backseat and gagging him. The pair then drove to the predetermined dumping spot near Wolf Lake in Hammond, Indiana. They waited for nightfall to remove Bobby's clothes and dump his body in a culvert. To obscure his identity and the fact he was Jewish, they poured hydrochloric acid on the boy's genitals and face. By the time Leopold and Loeb returned to Chicago, the word had already spread that Bobby Franks was missing. Leopold called Frank's mother, telling her that her son was kidnapped and the ransom instructions would follow. The ransom note received demanded $10,000, but before it could be paid, the body of Bobby Franks was discovered. During the investigation, Loeb went about his normal routine quietly, but Leopold began talking to anyone who would listen, including reporters and investigators. He was quoted as saying, "If I were to murder anybody, it would be just such a cocky little son of a bitch as Bobby Franks." While searching the crime scene, police found a pair of glasses with a distinct hinge. The glasses were traced to an optometrist in Chicago who informed the police that he prescribed them to Nathan Leopold Jr. There was no other evidence linking the pair to the crime except for his glasses. When the police asked Nathan Leopold how his glasses came to be found near Bobby Franks' body, he claimed that they fell out of his pocket during a bird-watching trip the previous weekend. On May 29, Leopold and Loeb were both summoned for formal questioning about the crime. The pair claimed that on the night of the crime, they picked up 2 women in Leopold's car and dropped them off near a golf course but didn't get their last names. Their alibi was proven to be a fabrication when Leopold's chauffeur told police he was repairing the car, and this was confirmed by his wife. On June 7, a burnt typewriter was discovered in Jackson Park Lagoon. Loeb was the first to confess, but he claimed that Leopold was the one who murdered Bobby while he drove. Leopold swiftly confessed after Loeb, but he insisted that he had been the one driving while Loeb committed the murder. Apart from the initial detail of who was driving the car, their confessions matched on all the other details. Both men admitted that they were driven by their thrill-seeking Superman delusions and their obsession with committing the perfect murder. Leopold confessed that he wanted to know what it felt like to kill, but was disappointed when he felt the same as always. On May 31, the state's attorney announced the confessions. Leopold and Loeb's parents hired the best, and most expensive, criminal attorney they could find, Clarence Darrow. Darrow knew his clients would be convicted. His goal, as always, was to save them from the death penalty. Their trial became a media spectacle and was labeled the trial of the century. Everyone expected that the defense team would enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, but Darrow elected to enter a plea of guilty. He believed that this would be the best way for the pair to avoid the death penalty. Their extended sentencing hearing lasted for 32 days between July and August 1924. At the conclusion, Clarence Darrow made a 12-hour impassioned speech about why his clients shouldn't be sentenced to the death penalty. On September 10, 1924, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb were sentenced to 99 years each in prison. Leopold and Loeb were initially held at Joliet Prison, where they were kept apart as much as possible, but they were able to maintain their friendship. Leopold was transferred to Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill in 1931, and Loeb was transferred there not long after. While at the center, the pair were able to expand the school-prison system, adding a high school and junior college curriculum. On January 28, 1936, Richard Loeb was attacked by fellow inmate Richard Day with a straight razor in the prison showers. He had his throat slashed from behind. Day claimed that the attack was in self-defense after he was sexually assaulted by Loeb. There is no evidence that Loeb was a sexual predator while in prison, but Day was later caught at least once in a sexual act with a fellow inmate. After Loeb's death, Leopold became a model prisoner and made significant contributions to improving the conditions at Stateville Penitentiary. He reorganized the library, revamping and teaching in the prison school system, and volunteered in the prison hospital. In 1944, Leopold volunteered for a malaria study at the prison. He was inoculated with malaria pathogens and subjected to experimental treatments. While in prison, he was approached by a former classmate, Meyer Levin, for assistance with writing a fictionalized version of the Franks murder. Leopold refused but offered Levin a chance to contribute to his memoir. Meyer refused and instead proceeded with the fictionalized story called Compulsion, despite Leopold's objections. His autobiography was released in 1958 as part of his campaign to gain parole. In March 1958, Nathan Leopold was released from prison. The Brethren Service Commission helped him get a job as a hospital technician in Puerto Rico. Later that same year, he attempted to start the Leopold Foundation to help disturbed youths with the proceeds from his autobiography, but this was blocked by the state of Illinois on the grounds it violated his parole. In 1959, Nathan Leopold attempted to block a movie adaptation of Compulsion, but the Illinois Supreme Court ruled against him because he had confessed to the crime. He could not reasonably argue that any book had injured his reputation. He moved to Santurce and married a widowed florist. Leopold received a master's degree from the University of Puerto Rico. He went on to teach there, and he also did leprosy research at the medical school. He went on to release another book called Checklist of Birds of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands in 1963. On August 29, 1971, Nathan Leopold died of a diabetes-related heart attack at 66 years old. Random fact: the original Scream film is a fictionalized version of this case. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Crafts and Crimes. If you're interested in the things I'm crafting, please check out the links in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment below with what future cases you want me to talk about. Don't forget to subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any future uploads. I'll see you all next time.